Well, hello fellow game developers. Brian Malloy here, and today's video is going to be about explosions, those wonderful things that we all love to see. And basically I know a couple of ways to do explosions. I'm going to show both of them to you in this dumb little video here. So what you see is this little plane flying across and this stupid little crow flying across. Let me explode this crow. Okay, I call that frames. It's just a sequence of frames. I think there are about 12 frames going here. And it's the same as really a multi-frame sprite, except that when you get to the end of the frame sequence, you stop the animation. Watch, see? Once he gets to the bottom, although actually what I do is restore it back to what it originally was. And I want to show you how to do that too, by the way, how you can restore it. So I would just call that a sequence of frames. It's really very easy to do, except that you have to have states. So right now in its normal state, and right now it's in its exploding state. And when it's in its exploding state, I'm simply running a different sequence of frames. See, the crow right now has, wait, stop, don't, okay, I did it. Okay, the flying crow has maybe 4 frames, 4 or 5 frames, I don't know what. And I'm running through that sequence. It goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, if you know what I mean. Now, once I explode the stupid crow, then I do those 12 frames, and it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 11, and then I revert back to the 4 or 5 frames of the normal sequence. So that's all that consists of. So that's very easy to do. So in terms of ease of doing that, no problem. The problem with that is getting the frames. I mean, somebody has to draw them, or I have to scarf them somewhere from the internet and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you don't feel like drawing the frames, if you want to take an easier way out, in my opinion, you can explode them. So this is a chunking. So I'm going to chunk. So that's a sequence of chunks. Essentially what I do is I carve this plane up along the length and width. I make a grid. And I do that grid, and then I send those little chunks off into various directions. Okay, here we'll do them all. Well, I'll chunk them all. You can chunk them all. I don't think the chunking looks so good with like an animal. Like crows are actually animals, not to be disrespectful to crows, whereas planes are like objects. And I think they look better with chunking, whereas if you have the frames. So anyway, 2 different ways of showing explosions. One is with frames of animation, and the other is with chunks. So I don't have a whole lot to say about the frames, but let me just show you one other example of some frames of animation. Okay, so here's another example of just a sequence of frames. And the only difference with this sequence of frames is I think this consists of maybe 22 frames. It's a lot of more frames than you might think. And all I do is I run from 0 to 21, and then I simply go back from 0 to 21. So its x velocity is 0, its y velocity is 0, but it's nothing other than a multi-frame sprite. Plain and simple. I do nothing else to it. So I instantiate a multi-frame sprite with x velocity 0, y velocity 0, and simply run through the sequence of frames. Once again, the difficulty here is that you have to have the frames. Let me switch to a different sequence. Now this is a sequence of frames where you see just another sequence of frames. So, you know, you can have all kinds of little explosions like this as long as you can come up with a frame. So I'm going to conclude that you could probably do a sequence of frames just like a multi-frame sprite if you wanted to. So the next thing I want to talk about is how we would do chunking. Now in this part of the video, I want to explain how chunking might work, what classes you'll need. And then I'm going to have a separate video where I'll show you how to actually incorporate it into your game. Okay, so now I'm going to start talking about chunks. So let me just explode that square. Now what you see there is there aren't very many chunks, and so it doesn't look quite as good. Let me switch to something else. We're watching the snowball. Oh wait till the snowball goes. Let me explode the snowball. I mean, I don't know if that looked any better. It looked kind of funny with the black thing around the background. It's supposed to be a snowball. Let me find something else. Here, let's explode this star. I don't know. Does that look good? Notice they come back. Let me find this little. I'm going to explode a little star. See that little star explode? Okay. I don't know. And I don't know if I like that. Let's do a coin. See the coin? Oh man, those little chunkaroos are little. Let's get a bigger coin. Okay, so there's another coin. Okay, so there's chunking. Now how is that implemented? So really, excuse me, to implement it you need two classes, a chunk class and an exploding sprite class. And I've put those in the repository for you. So here's a chunk class and here is an exploding sprite class. Where is it? Right here. Here's the exploding sprite class. So those are the two classes you need, and I've provided those for you. Really not hard to do. What I'd like to do next is drag you through those classes. So first of all, a chunk is like a bullet. Let me just show you that. So let me look at the chunk, the chunk.cpp here, and then we'll look at chunk.h, and we'll see them too. Okay, notice that a chunk is just a sprite. Basically, chunk is a sprite. And notice there's no draw function in this class. Let me just show you the whole header. Okay, here's the whole header file. No draw. Why? I'm just going to use the draw up here. And there's not even an update. Really, I do have an update. There's the update. But it's practically the same as the update up in Sprite. It's the same as a bullet, except now I have to keep track of distance. Once the chunk goes to a certain distance, then I want to take it, and I've got two lists, a chunk list and a free list. And the explosion starts with all of the chunks in the chunk list. So I'll explain that next. But at any rate, once a chunk goes a certain distance, it hits this max distance, then it's gone too far. You see, it's gone too far. There's that function, gone too far. So what? Here's my update. My update here, I actually do compute the increment, and I am actually setting it to the increment here. I don't know why, but then I keep track of this distance to see if it's gone too far. I don't know why I didn't just use the update up above and not done all of this. I could have done it that way instead of doing this. But at any rate, then I see if it's gone too far. So that's a chunk. So that's out there for you. So there's the chunk. The really important class, I guess, is the exploding sprite. So let's start with the bottom, and then I'll bring up the top. And once you see that, let me do this. No. Exploding sprite.h. Okay, so here's exploding sprite.h. Oh, sorry. Let me show you the header first. Okay, so here's an exploding sprite. Boy, not much in that. There's not much in the header. It's a sprite also, and it accepts a sprite in its constructor. It's just the way I implemented it. If you don't like it, change it. And I do have a draw and I do have an update. I need both the draw and the update. Why is that? Well, my draw in an exploding sprite is actually different from the draw for a sprite because I've really got lists. I'm drawing all of the chunks in a list. So here are my two lists. I have my chunk list and my free list. I called it chunks. I probably could have called it chunk list. So here's my chunk list and here's my free list. And what I do is I start off with all of the chunks in the chunk list. And once a chunk has gone too far, I move it from the chunk list to the free list. And once the chunk list is empty, the explosion is finished. And so I've got several functions up here to take care of that. So I can see how many chunks are left in my chunk list. And I can say, do this chunk count. So basically, that's the way an exploding sprite works. So let's look down below. So first of all, I have to make an explosion. And that's where I carve the basic image up into this rectangular grid. So let's look at the constructor. Here's my constructor. And I just put that little thing in there. I initialize my chunk list to empty. I initialize the free list. And then I come down here and I call this function make chunks. And when I call make chunks, what I pass into it is the number of chunks that I want to make. So, and it'll make as many chunks. Actually, if this is a 12, it's going to make 144 chunks. So let me just show you that. So if I show you the XML, and we look down here in the XML, each of these has a chunk size. So for example, this is the snowball. It has a chunk size of 16, which means that's the grid. The grid is 16 by 16, which means there's actually going to be a total of 256 chunks. And then down here for the spinning star, I have 16, and then anything else that explodes. So for example, the blue square, I guess I don't explode that. But anyway, you can specify in the XML how many chunks you want, and you can change that, like that blue square. Let me find that. Here's the blue square. Notice I didn't have many chunks. Maybe that's not it. There's the blue square and there's only 4 chunks, which means there are 16 chunks. Let me show you that when I run this. So let me explode this blue square. You see there are a total of only 16 chunks. If I change this number here from a 4 to say 16, you're going to see a lot more chunks. Now watch when I explode it. Now let me bring it over here so you can see it. And there you see a lot more chunks. So I can modify that. I can also change the way the chunks are dispersed. And a lot of people have done that, and I'll show you some examples of that. But let me just take you through this first. So here's my make chunks. My make chunks function, which is called from the constructor, basically is just doing this grid thing and making chunks. Okay, basically that's what it's doing. Running through the grid and making all of these chunks. Let me also show you the draw. In the draw function, I just run through the list of chunks and draw them. And in the update function, I run through the list of chunks. I update each chunk, and then I have to check to see, did the chunk go too far? If the chunk went too far, put it into the free list and take it out of the chunk list. So basically, that's how chunks work. And of course, in my destructor, I have to clear these lists. But that's basically a way to do explosions. Now I'm going to do another video right after this where I'll show you how to incorporate chunks into your game. Several different ways so that you can make something explode using chunks. So anyway, I hope this video was helpful. Happy programming, happy gaming. Brian Malloy, over and out.